Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Welcome, Eva, to USEReady's webinar. Eva needs no introduction. In fact, she's very famous among the community of Makeover Monday. And in this chat, I'm going to interact and hopefully understand what is this new book all about, Empowered by Data. In fact, as soon as it was announced, I couldn't wait to get my copy. And I read through cover to cover, and I found it very fascinating, honestly. A little bit about Eva for all of you who, if you don't know about her, which is unlikely, but Eva has been a Tableau Zen Master for several years in a row. And then she keeps retaining that coveted title, prestigious Tableau Zen Master. She's also co-leader of Makeover Monday, which we'll talk a little bit about today. She's authored 2 books. One is Makeover Monday, and this book, new book, that's Empowered by Data. As I was saying earlier, Eva is, at least to me, a driving force for women's empowerment in the technology industry. Every time I interact with her, I learn so much. In fact, a little bit on the personal side, a very avid cyclist. While she's not educating the world with data, she's also passionate about baking and loves to cook. Today, let's learn about this book, Empowered by Data. What is this all about? And particularly focusing on the journey of analytics world and focusing on the power of community intelligence. Something that is very common about us at USEReady and Eva is this thought process around community intelligence. And in this book, Eva writes really a complete practitioner's guide and also shares a ton of examples how the communities are built, analytic communities are built all over the world. And she has done a ton of research, amazing job actually. And today we're going to read a little more. And before we get into the Q&A or specifics, I would also like to notify the audience that we are giving away 3 books to all of you who are participating today. It's just a simple raffle, and you'll be notified post-event if you won the book. In case you have any questions, feel free to drop in the question box that you see on the GoToWebinar window. So let's start here. Once again, Eva, welcome.
Thank you.
Again, I'd love to know, how did this Makeover Monday happen? I see that as a sort of genesis to this community development and community intelligence in general. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I'll start with explaining what Makeover Monday is, just for those who may not be aware, which is totally acceptable. So Makeover Monday is a global social data project, and it was started by Andy Kriebel. And when he realized that, to build his skills in Tableau and data visualization, a good way to do that would be to regularly practice creating better visualizations. And you can find lots of terrible visualizations out there in the wild. If you go to Google Images and you type in dashboard, you'll find a lot of things that aren't great. And so he kind of made it his mission to improve his own skills, and people, watched along the way. And at some point he said, well, why don't we make it a community project? So him and Andy Cotgreve, actually, from Tableau, did in 2016, they created Makeover Monday as a community project. So they did their makeovers. They wrote a blog post every week about their own work, and they shared the data set so that everyone else could participate alongside them. And I took over from Andy Cotgreve in 2017. So I've now completed 4 years, and this is my 5th year of co-leading Makeover Monday. The idea being, every week we provide a visualization that's a starting point and a data set, and we encourage everyone who participates to create something better than the original, or just something different, but ideally better. And it's really about best practices. It's about back to basics, creating something that communicates information more effectively than what already exists, and really practicing Tableau or any other tool you use, and how you communicate information. So after that first year of Makeover Monday and doing that together with Andy, we realized there are so many lessons learned from the community in the work they did. We started doing webinars to give people feedback, and all of that activity gave us so much content that we thought, let's write a book about it. And we did. So it's a book that's packed with visual examples. We have actually 300 visualizations in the book, but also a lot of instructions and lessons learned on how to communicate more effectively with data and with data visualization. So it's not a Tableau how-to guide, it's not Tableau specific, it's really tool agnostic. It's really about the best practices so that every analyst, every person working with data can create better visualizations.
That's fantastic. And I'm sure there was a pivotal moment when you all realized it's actually becoming a global phenomenon. I don't think I know of any other similar global phenomena. You have brought different cultures, different communities, different countries all over the world. So what was that moment, pivotal moment when you realized it's becoming really global phenomena? What happened?
I think for me, it was probably the Tableau conferences where we would do Makeover Monday live events. So we would get Tableau to give us one big room for a couple of hours, get everyone together who wanted to come. And in 2016, I was a participant and there were 300 people in the room. And then in 2017, we had 750, I think, or 700. The year after, we had 1,000, and then we had 1,700 people. So it grew really rapidly. But also, in addition to that, one really cool moment. Well, there were two actually. After Tableau Conference I think it was 2018. Oh, I don't want to lie. Maybe I don't know, 2017 or 2018. No, it must be 2017, the one in Vegas. I flew to the West Coast. So I landed in San Jose and there was someone at the airport who's like, oh, you're Eva Murray from Makeover Monday. And I'm like, what? So that person had obviously just come from Tableau Conference. I'm not that famous, but they had, seen me there. And then I went and had a meeting with a, rather well-known company on the West Coast. And I walked in there into a meeting with a person who had a fairly common name, so I didn't really recognize her name. And she's like, oh yeah, you're Eva from Makeover Monday. And I'm like, yeah, this is cool. This is obviously something that even if people don't actively participate, they've heard of and they recognize, and they see the benefit of people participating and also people learning from it.
That is super cool. And actually, you're very modest, by the way. So something I really liked about this book is that there are a ton of examples and also very relatable examples. Is there one out of these hundreds of examples that you researched while authoring this book, one that particularly impressed you, with any details you could share to our audience?
Yeah, the one that I really liked hearing about, because I truly believe in building up the next generation of data analysts, is the story about St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. And what they have done is they have they had a handful of really passionate people who were already part of the Tableau community and who were senior students and then went on to become alumni and working in the industry. And they built a Makeover Monday and data analytics, data visualization community at the university that's about teaching, sharing, but also networking. And I felt that was a really great use of the resources that are out there in the community, but also connecting the alumni with the current students, with Tableau focused employers in the region, so big companies that have Tableau as one of their tools, and that also use the Tableau user group as a way to bring people together, help them learn. And what I really like about it is not just learning very specific technical skills, analytical skills, but that the students are already connected to potential future employers and as well as the community. So I thought that was a great example, and hopefully people who have read the book or who might win the book, they get a chance to read through that case study as well.
That's so fantastic. I'm amazed about this aspect about Tableau. It touched so many lives and continues to do so. And I can't think of another product that has had that kind of a far-reaching impact way beyond technology way beyond industries. That just continues to amaze me, actually. And there are hundreds, of such examples. Thank you for sharing that, actually. If What are the major hurdles when you've seen these enterprises trying to grow or build this culture of analytics? What kind of hurdles they encounter? What is stopping them?
Yeah, I'm going to start with a controversial comment because I think it applies to me as well. As people, we tend to be inherently lazy, and we don't want to think of ourselves as being lazy. But really, if you tell us, go run around the block or go sit on the couch and watch Netflix, like, what decision are you going to make? We tend to go the path of least resistance, and that's also where a lot of innovation comes from, because we don't want to do the uncomfortable stuff, or we don't want to do the kind of tedious, dull, repetitive tasks. We automate it, which I think is a sign that we want to fix something because we don't want to do it. And sometimes that is because maybe we're too lazy to do it, or we just don't find it stimulating. So I think there is a little bit of just, you have to get momentum with these communities, and they rely on people doing things. Everyone is going to be excited at the beginning, but it's about keeping it going. And this is, being my 5th year of leading Makeover Monday together with Andy and in between Charlie. It's a lot of work, and it's not trivial to continue something at the same consistent level for many, many years when you do it, on top of your day job. And a lot of these community initiatives are people's hobby. If you can do them in a work context and it's part of your job, that's a different story, because you can do it during work hours. So it requires a bit less sacrifice, which I think is good. And I think that's what's needed. So that's one thing around processes in organizations, making it so that people can actually do this as part of their job. It's not an extra task that they have to find extra time for in the day, but make it part of their role, because it just means that people don't have to overstretch, and they don't, risk maybe getting burnt out or something like that just because they want to build this, and kind of kills the fun. But also finding the right people who are committed, who are enthusiastic, who have a certain set of skills or knowledge that help them actually get it off the ground, because you can't just have super enthusiastic people who don't have any subject matter expertise leading this. So you need a few experts. And then, of course, tools. You have this on your slide. Tools can be a hindrance. And most people listening here, I would assume, have some tools in the organization that let them work with data. But if they're not the right tools for the job, or they're not as enjoyable as they could be, or maybe the tools are there but I can't access them, that's another hurdle. So I would have a look at, kind of keep it simple, get the right people, don't have too many people. You don't want to have 10 people, because then you're going to get death by committee. If you're just starting, get a couple of people, let them make some progress, add more people later on. And then absolutely looking at the processes. So what could get in the way there?
That's a very sound advice and actually astute observation. I think we can relate to that as well at USEReady. When we built internal community to teach our new joiners and how to scale that, we went through a very similar experience. Initially, it was literally a couple of people just huddle together and build it, and that's phenomenal. How simple, but yet it's so hard, right? I like the way the book is organized. Super nice. Particularly the example of how you've taken Makeover Monday as an example for global community and extended the concept to an enterprise community. And there are some very specific examples that I really liked and relevant, I think, to most shared services or center of excellence leaders out there. Everyone agrees that community is important and beneficial. However, it's very hard to form and scaling it. And what are the some of the risks? You have covered a lot of risks and lessons learned extensively. And what is a very common risk typical enterprise faces in developing their own community?
Yeah, there are a few, and the first one I would start with are distractions. So on the one hand, things could distract you from building this community. So if the community is part of your job or maybe not part of your job, your main priority, your main task that could distract you from actually making some progress there. If there's always firefighting to do, you always get pulled into meetings last minute to fix something, you're not going to have time for strategic thinking, for sitting down and planning how you could grow this community. So you could be distracted from it, but also the community could be a distraction or seen as a distraction. And I know that management might be reluctant to say, well, yeah, here people are, coming together once a week and they're going to do this. They might not see the value. They might think, oh, they're just distracted. They're just going to be chatting all day, not really doing anything useful. So it's this twofold risk, and it needs to be addressed by just saying, okay, how are we going to communicate in this community? How are we going to interact, connect, make progress? But also, how can we carve out time that's dedicated to building it so that those two risks are addressed? Another one is disruption, and that's because we're dealing with people, and there might be characters who just aren't a fan, who question everything. And hopefully that's not the case, but I want to be realistic. Probably the bigger your organization, the more likely it is that you'll find people like that who will just, rain on your parade and say, oh, this is useless, or, what good is it going to achieve? So being prepared, being aware who those disruptors could be, how you will address it, and one really important ingredient for that is having management buy-in, having management support, and also that they stand up for you if you don't necessarily have maybe the authority, the power to stand up for, you might stand up for yourself, but if you don't see that being respected, then by all means, there needs to be someone who can step in. So those are kind of two big risks, but then typical things like in project management, things like scope creep, no clear timelines or deadlines, no resources, no budget. It might not even have to be money, but it could be things like, well, can you allocate time to it? Do you have the right tools? So those are some of the risks that could derail your success. And it's about just taking a very hard look at what is your situation and how can you address those.
Very interesting. So 2D, and which is distraction and disruption, very interestingly caught my attention as well. And should it be a top-down messaging there to get enough people, or is it a mid-level? Where do you see in a large enterprise the initiation or the formation of the communities? Is it at a department level? Any thoughts around that?
I would always start with the people who actually want to do it and who will lead it, because if someone from the top says we need to have a community, people will be like, oh, yawn, here's another thing for us to do. But if they come up with the idea, I think the people who will do the most amount of work, so people who lead the community or call it send-off excellence, whatever it might be, they should be the ones driving this. But very early on, you need that buy-in from the top. So it needs to be from both sides, but I think it should be driven bottom up.
Bottom up, that's interesting. So how, like in writing this book, how many people and participants did you speak while gathering this? It's quite impressive actually. There's so many varieties. It's almost like you did a lot of sampling of data from different geographies, different sizes, different problem sets. How did it happen?
Oh, I probably spoke to 25, 30, 35 people, and I couldn't even include all the stories because at some point the chapters would, get out of balance if you have too many stories in one, not enough in another. But I spoke to individuals who participate in communities, individuals who lead communities, and then organizations as well, because I wanted to have some more corporate examples so that people see what would that look like in a specific industry or an organization of a certain size. And it was really interesting to hear their stories and to hear kind of what have they come up against and how did they solve those challenges to get to a point where they're now growing and they're seeing results, they're seeing really good benefits for the people who participate.
Wow, that's impressive. And these hand-picked leaders are actually, I'm assuming you looked at those large enterprises across the world who are very inclined to go after and build analytics culture within, and then you selected leaders in that community, in that data set, and then you interview them. Thank you so much for sharing that, because that's, to me, would have been impossible for someone, unless they're your stature, to sort of do that. I in this book, something that I also liked very much is the templates. I think you've given a lot of templates for the readers that they can just immediately put to use, right? I feel, I mean, it's those templates alone are 100x return on what we pay for the book. It's really that simple math. I mean, when I saw that, I was very impressed with those templates. And it seems to me, switching the gears a little bit to this, while we talked a lot about the BI and the dashboards, the principles of visual analytics, I think the biggest, the elephant in the room, if you will, remains to be data, right? Data quality is a concern, data governance is a concern, how people distribute data is a concern. I still find, organizations have struggled to find a balance there. They're trying to grant access privilege to a database. It's super old school, but obviously they are doing it for a reason. Certainly there is this demand for data democratization, and IT organization, who's typically the custodian of data infrastructure, is forced to grant privileges to the database information and stuff. Um, I think I also see there is an trend to invest in developing data sharing repositories within the organizations. There are some products who are really promoting that data sharing culture. What are your thoughts about it? Is data sharing culture relevant to the communities? Is it, how do you see that?
I think it's really important actually, because if you have those structural challenges in your architecture, it's going to be really hard to go beyond asking very narrow questions. And I think especially the last year and through this pandemic, many people, even people who have nothing to do with data in their day job, have realized how important data is and how important it is to share data. So there are people who recognize, well, things around this virus, we need to share that between research institutes, universities, between scientists, and all of that across the world, because the virus is everywhere and we can't really solve the problem unless everyone has access to this information. So I think that's a really good example that shows people need access to the data. They need to work collaboratively, even if they've never met each other. But even more so in an organization where you have people in finance, in marketing, in the product department, in development, in sales. They're all trying to do the same thing: sell more of their product or their services to a customer. And the best way to do that is if you can all access the information you need, that's kind of coherent, but also enriched with as much information as possible, so you can make a really informed decision, so that the salespeople and the marketing people understand more about the customer, but also know about the product. And it all needs to be a really kind of holistic approach. And I think data sharing is going to be more and more important in the weeks, the months, and the years to come, because we're starting to see more of an openness to say, yeah, we need to share this, we need to provide this information. And there are so many more publicly available data sets now that are being shared that you can use to enhance your own analytics, whether it's population, weather data, and that kind of stuff.
Very interesting. In fact, in our experience consulting in the data industry, we see a lot of times, enterprises are trying to get their control around data. And I think one of the things that in this book you talked about, my favorite chapter is chapter 10. The reason being, you have shared some amazing lessons learned. And data portal has been sort of it's got attention of I think enterprise data leaders, and they're all thinking about putting in how about putting in a data portal. I think everyone knows putting in BI portal is cool. It's been already there. For the most part, I think data portals are sort of upcoming a theme. I think I like the examples of how you started using data.world, which I really love actually as a product, and how when you started integrating the content, and then the discussions and the interactions while sharing with social media. I mean, there was a lot of examples in that chapter which I really liked. I must say, readers definitely should read that chapter 10. There's some really useful nuggets in that chapter. And in terms of how they go about, now that we have BI culture, we have BI community, and then data sharing, data access thought process in place. Um, Again, within an enterprise, are there any definitive paths, or how do you now certify organizations as mentors or trainers? Like within any thoughts around that, how to go about selecting the leaders who are or volunteers who can actually help others?
Yeah, I think they don't need to be certified. So sure, it helps if they have training, but I think despite being German myself, we shouldn't place too much importance on a piece of paper that says that you've done some exam. I think it comes really organically. If people are involved themselves and they learn and they build their skills, that will help them become leaders in that field. Now, it might not be a natural progression for some, but the chance is definitely there. And I can tell you when I first did my first Makeover Monday, so in 2016, I just participated about half the time, and my visualizations were terrible. And a year later, suddenly people take my advice. It's because I consistently participated, I built my skills, I learned from others. I also learned so much by teaching others because I had to figure out a way to explain things and a way to help them understand maybe if they've made a mistake or if there's a better way for them to explain something. So teaching in itself will tell you and teach you a whole lot about your own skills. And I'd say, I don't know if it's necessarily certifications. Mainly, I'm a fan of just do it and learn and be open-minded. And the most important part of learning in this process is to listen to other people. We don't teach by being the ones who talk most of the time. It's really important to listen and observe and then talk at the right times, delivering the most amount of value you can. So while I would say I'm quite visible in the community, I'm definitely not talking nearly as much as I used to on things like Twitter, LinkedIn, and others, because I would like to pick my moments carefully and have an impact rather than constantly be talking, because then people switch off and there is no kind of golden nuggets that you're handing out anymore. So I would say one thing is participate, do it yourself, because you have to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk as well, and building your skills that you can then share later on, and using those opportunities when someone in your organization is maybe new to data or someone new joins the team to coach them, to mentor them, even if it's just as part of the onboarding process, because it gives you a chance to see, do you like leading other people? Do you like guiding them? And then once you have an idea for something you could do as part of a data community, put that idea out there, show how it could work, show what it would look like, get a few people together, run it for a few weeks and see what comes out of it. And I'm always a fan of deliver something first before you then ask for resources, for money, for time. It's like just show them what you can do, because it's a better way than talking a lot without having anything to prove.
I think you're really emphasizing on this value of humility. Um, People in these roles should not assume the title. That's not relevant. What really matters is actually creating the impact. And I think without the core value of humility, you cannot really achieve that. And it's very interesting. And it's actually seemingly um, easy, but it's not. So I can sense that. But value of humility is actually something that I really appreciate. Um,
Thank you. And
as
and
this,
if I can say something else on that topic, actually, because I feel that's really important, people might think, oh, it's easy for you to say because you're already there. But I wasn't there 5 years ago. I did all the work to actually get there. Sure, I had people who helped me and supported me, and that's important. But you don't get that support unless you show something they can support and that they can stand behind. So it's humility, but it's also patience, because you don't want to be the one-time fireworks. You want to be that consistent, I don't know, call it a star, call it a light, whatever it is. You want to be there every day showing up. People might be like, wow, fireworks, and they have this huge applause, but the next day they forget about you. So be consistent, use that humility, like you said, Uday. Be humble, be consistent, do the work, show up, and you will be successful. It's going to pay off much more than doing everything on day one and having nothing left after 10 days, and and then you kind of fizzle out. So yeah.
That makes me very happy because at USEReady, I mean, this is very personal to me, where I think our core values that we chose to be what we are, humility is very important, and another one is continuous improvement. You're saying those two are very important values. Continuously improving, being humble is how you actually start building a community. Very interesting. Are there milestones once you start building it, once you have the foundation, that serves as, okay, you're making progress, right? Is there a gauge, or is there a method? How do we know, have we reached a mature state? Any recommendations, suggestions?
Yeah, so I would say if your community aims to, let's say, meet regularly, what I would suggest is, if you want to meet every week, do that for a month as a pilot program. And after a month, if you can keep it going for the rest of the quarter, I would say that's a milestone. If you can show the consistency that people show up, that you have new people. So consistency is one, and that you could count that as the number of meetups. People showing up and the growth of the number of participants is another milestone you can show. But also, let's use Tableau as an example, because I imagine there are a lot of people on here who use Tableau. If you have Tableau users and one of your goals is to get their skills up, maybe things like Tableau certifications could be a really good milestone that you can measure. So how many people have learned through your community program, and how many have gone on to actually achieve milestone XYZ? Maybe it's internal e-learning that you provide, or it could be the official certification levels, and that's something you can prove. So I think the milestones depend a bit on the purpose of your community, but once you have determined what you actually want to achieve, it will be quite easy to figure out, okay, what are going to be the milestones along the way. And don't make it a full year cycle. Like, start with something small and manageable, because if you're like me, you're probably a bit impatient and you want to show something fairly quickly. That will give you momentum, but also gives you the trust of management that you're actually going somewhere.
Absolutely makes sense. I think it comes down to that discipline and consistency that drives the milestone. And if we set ourselves goals, I think I was going to think maybe we should, everyone should start with a specific set of goals and track against those goals. And is there a way to quantify the benefits? Like, if I'm someone who's looking to, convince my management that we should do this in our company, how do I quantify the benefits to the management? Is there any ideas, suggestions,
Yeah,
recommendations?
so I'd say, I mean, in addition to what I've previously mentioned, it's definitely about learning and development. And this could be even things like the money saved because you didn't need to run public training courses, because you actually have people internally who can teach the others. But also things like that you might need questionnaires to tell people, hey, let us know about how satisfied you are in your job, because you could reach high levels of job satisfaction because people suddenly have something else that's fun in their job. So doing that, getting people's feedback on how they are involved and what benefits it delivers to them. And then things like, well, we're having lunch and learn sessions, you're having knowledge sharing sessions, maybe you're inviting external experts into your community to speak. Kind of much like this, Fireside Chat, you could do something like that. Anything that shows that you're upskilling the people is definitely going to be helpful. But then also the people need to show their improvements. And when it comes to that, it could be simple things like you had a suite of reports that were all really kind of old and uninspiring. And I'm not talking about, create visualization art and no one understands it anymore, but maybe they needed to be updated to be easier to understand, simplified, whatever else. And that could be an exercise you do through this community, that you update a bunch of reports, that you improve visualizations, and that you maybe even tidy up and get rid of a bunch of stuff. So those are all things that can be measured as well in terms of numbers, but also how much is the usage going up. You could test data literacy levels. You could maybe even have like little data literacy exams. I'm sure there are some out there. But also maybe there's extracurricular courses that your people can get involved in. So for example, if your organization sponsors you to do courses on Udemy or Coursera about data literacy, maybe the community is a catalyst to get people involved there. So I think there's a bunch of measures that can be employed. Not everything will be hard numbers. Some stuff might need to be explained, but that's where your creativity will come in.
Totally makes sense. I think I have come across what was showcased at the Tableau conference in 18, I think. Skill belts in a box was a good way to sort of measure the analytic literacy and how they are tracking the lessons and the learnings from the community. Very interesting. And within, especially when people are remote, I mean, since everyone's talking about remote, I thought I might as well ask you a question. Are there approaches to building analytics culture? Something like, in fact, for me, I feel like Makeover Monday is a good example of how team members are working from remote and actually build analytic culture. What would be your what's your take on that? Or what are other techniques or anything that we could do remotely as team
Yeah,
members?
I think a big opportunity for building this remotely is to use the onboarding process for new people who join the organization to make them part of the community. So you could have different team members present their work with data. You could, if you already have activities, present those activities and explain how they work, how people can get involved. I think that's a really good time to get the attention from new people. It certainly can be challenging when things are remote, but if you can find a way to present everything that's available, it could be technical support sessions. So in the Tableau world, they might be called Tableau doctor sessions, where once a week, 1, 2, 3 of your experts are available, whether it's over Slack, over Zoom, whatever it might be, but making it very visible, the support you can have, and then having regular meetups. Maybe it's once a fortnight you have a user group, or once a fortnight you have a user group. The other, so once a month you have a user group, but every fortnight there's something happening. So once it could be more technical, once it could be more social, because I'd be very mindful of not making it a 3-hour session. I think that's just too strenuous. We're all tired of sitting in front of screens all the time, but if there can be shorter sessions more frequently, you might be able to attract more people, but also have them kind of drop in and out of sessions they need, rather than everyone having to commit to this 3-hour block once a month. So I'd say look at what tools you have to connect, Slack, Zoom, Convo, whatever it might be, and also what works in your team and with that culture of the organization. If you have a really large organization that spans the entire world, you might just want to start small in your geography so that it's just a bit easier to get off the ground, and then start inviting people on to kind of cover different time zones. But it requires a bit of creativity, and then it's trial and error, because an online meeting, apart from people's time, which is something you should be mindful of, it doesn't cost a lot of money to get these things started. It's much more expensive to fly people in from all over the world for a one-day conference. So try these things out, because by the time we can all go back to offices, you might have something really solid in place that you can turn into real world, real life events.
Absolutely, very, very helpful. Um, this is something about, legacy BI. This is the last question, and then we'll switch over to audience questions. Um, there's this legacy BI culture, right? Where when that is translated to modern BI, it still is something, the dashboards are being created by IT or someone outsourced model, versus training, educating the business users to create the same on their own. What's your take on Like, have you seen this commonly, or have you, when you interviewed these leaders, do they also have the similar challenges? Are there any lessons?
I've seen it, and I don't think it works. And I want to qualify my opinion here, because yes, there are people in IT teams who are very business savvy and who have all the skills to build great dashboards that are meaningful. But most of the time, IT teams are there to provide the infrastructure so that all of us can do our work. There are laptops, there are network issues, access, all of the really infrastructure technical things that we all need to be enabled. They're building the roads basically for us to drive on. They're not the ones designing the cars. So when it comes to then using dashboards and using data, I don't think that's where the IT team is the strongest. This is where data analysts should come in, business analysts who work really closely with the business, also understand customers, suppliers, processes, etc. They're the kind of people who do that. I need people who are, super good at building servers, building infrastructure, who can manage the email system and just make sure we can all communicate. We are all online. We are equipped with materials and kind of gadgets and all these things. I don't expect them to build me a dashboard that tells me how my business is doing. That's not their skill set. So if I never saw that again, I'd be okay. I think we are definitely in 2021 at a point where businesses are able to do this, but specifically it should still be people with training around data and data analysis, because the tools these days are very easy to use, and that's partly something very dangerous, because anyone can build a visualization, but they might not know what they're doing. And I see that, to be honest, too much in the communities that I'm part of, where people just put a visualization out there that has no foundation in something statistical. They don't necessarily understand correlation versus causation, all those things. So you still need the skills. I'm not saying businesses can just pick up a software and build their own dashboards, but that's where it should sit. And it should be people who are trained to do it. And they also, just as much as they need data skills, they need communication skills, because they need to talk to people, they need to listen even more so, and understand and translate that into something everyone can work with.
Totally makes sense. I think the conundrum is, are we going to train IT with the business, or are we going to give easier tools to use to the business? So very, very aptly put. So we are going to receive some questions. I'm going to read out to you from the audience. First one is actually about, I think it's more to Eva. How did you get into Tableau Community and the impact it had on you?
Oh, yeah. In a previous job, when I lived in Australia, I had to evaluate BI tools for us to use for the team. And it was a very quick evaluation because there were only two options, and Tableau was the only one that you didn't really need coding skills for. So I said, well, if we're using it in the business, that's the only sensible one. And I started using it. This was at a time where the Australian Tableau team only had 5 staff, and they were in the building next door. So Meg Bryler, who some people may have heard of, who was a very integral part of building up that Australian team, he sat with me a lot and explained things and taught me stuff. And I was introduced to the Tableau community within that Australian context. I met really cool people there. And because it was so small, it was a very easy way to meet really senior people, people who had been at Tableau for a long time. So I got to meet Alyssa Fink very early on, and I'm fortunate to consider her a friend. But I also got to be in a meeting with Pat Hanrahan, who came over to talk to a bunch of Tableau customers. And I think at the time I didn't even appreciate what a genius he was, but I know that now. And yeah, so I was fortunate to be there when it was early on, so I got a lot of exposure. And then moving to Germany first and now London helped me be actually in the right time zone for interacting with the European community.
That's fascinating. I'm so happy it turned out so well to all of us, actually. Thank you for continuing those early lessons and building this global phenomena. Another question is about this is regarding the one of the common risks we talked about. We enable employees to write to a sandbox project on the Viz tool. I'm pretty much seeing this as a Tableau specific maybe, right? We publish to a project within Tableau environment. After reviews and passing the competence bar. However, it feels like it's a block because they have to wait for a day to, promote and all that stuff. It sort of defeats the agility of the self-service process, right? For the internal communities, do you encourage the the feeling that the process is their friend and for the good of their peers? So keep the production clean. Like, how do you keep that? It comes to, I think, anything that's communal, anything that's, I think, community oriented, there is always the risk of, chaos. And how are there any ideas that you saw from a process perspective that you have seen?
It's a good question, and I think there's sometimes challenges in organizations in how Tableau, especially Tableau Server, is used at an enterprise level, because I think people come with the expectations of using it like this typical legacy tool. It works quite differently, but without trying to solve the world's problems. I would say, why not, for example, commission a site on Tableau Server where the community can do whatever they want, but they're responsible for it. So, you don't need to have your Tableau Server admins managing that content. That is the responsibility of the community. By all means, educate them, train them on how they should be using the site, the project, the groups, and all of that, because that's part of the process as well. You want them ideally to become almost like junior Tableau Server admins so that they learn, but it's their responsibility, and the stuff that's published there is not part of the general business production process, but it could be a prototype that then gets moved. So that's how I would approach it. Give them as much freedom as possible without weighing down what the business does and what the Tableau Server admins in particular need to do to keep the business stuff running.
Great. Next question is about data access, right? Ease of data access. I think that's data sharing is a very cool concept and everyone loves it. The question is about security. Are there any best practices you have seen to balance the security and access? Is there a magic bullet? I don't think there's a magic bullet, but curious to hear your thoughts.
I think it depends quite a bit on the culture and the organization. If you don't trust your employees, you're probably not going to give them access, but you could equally be very trusting and say, what are the reasons people shouldn't see this? So keep HR data separate. No one needs to know salaries and all that. Like there are legal boundaries that will protect some data, but the other data, I think, rather than saying why should John get access, why not say why shouldn't John get access? Especially if you're monitoring that access so that you can catch people out if they're using their access or taking advantage in a way they shouldn't. And if the data can only be accessed on, in, let's say, a central platform rather than be sent around in extracts, you can manage that risk. And employing things like row and column level security is probably a good idea. I'd say it's probably not a question we can really fully exercise here because it's just too complex, but it might actually shuffle around your fundamental beliefs about data in your organization, because you might have to actually ask yourself, why are we restricting all this access? And it's about listening to people. If you have an analyst who for 2 years has been trying to get access to a certain data set so they can do more analysis, why are you still denying that? Like, what is the reason that they can't get it? And listening to those requests and having people formulate them in a way that makes it easier for you to grant access. That might also be something in the process where you say, okay, we want to give more access to people, but we need them to, I don't know, commit to this or confirm this. And then people are probably quite happy to do that so that it goes faster. But at the moment, they might just be sitting there kind of banging their head against the wall.
Very interesting, actually. Looking at the same problem from an exactly opposite lens, is what I'm hearing, and very insightful. I think as the cloud becomes more pervasive and as adopted, I think organizations will have better tools also to manage these things. I think there is that the technical debt and then the tool gaps, right? That I think makes the whole problem more complicated when we think about, multi-factor authentication, authorization, permissions. It's still an evolving space, I think, in the context of cloud, but that's very interesting. There are some good products out there, but it's absolutely critical to see how to set up those things within the organization. Thank you for sharing it. Next question is about uh, self-service BI, right? Is this the new Excel? Like, I guess it's in the context of probably Tableau or Power BI or any BI tool that promotes more desktop-based creation and published to a centralized repository, etc. I think the question is this self-service BI the new Excel if companies don't change their culture?
I guess it depends what you define as business intelligence, because are we just talking about reporting? Because people tend to use Excel a
Mhm.
lot to say, these are the numbers, I'm going to put them in a chart. You can do
Okay.
the same in Tableau. You can say, these are the numbers, I'm going to put them in a chart. How much intelligence is there? And I'm not saying the person's intelligence, I'm just saying in the output, how much insight is there actually? So I don't think it will be the next Excel, because in Excel, I don't see it being easy to create insights. And I think the people who do create insights in their Excel-based analysis, they're using it very differently to 90% of the planet. And I think there's still a really big opportunity for business intelligence to be more than reporting. And absolutely for tools like Tableau to do more than reporting. Unfortunately, most people use it for reporting, and I would love for more people to say, okay, reporting, we'll worry about reporting later. Let's actually use it for analysis, because it's the beauty of it. You put some data in it, you play around with it, you literally play around with it, you drag and drop and you change things, and you're like, oh, I wonder what that is. And you just keep asking questions. That's what you should be doing. In Excel, it's really hard to ask questions, and yeah, so I think there's many more opportunities with self-service BI when done right. But if the whole purpose is reporting, it's never going to be much more than what Excel has been in the past as well.
That's a great point there. I think one of the transitions for many organizations is to consuming or stop consuming the reports. And I think it's I think established that humans are more successful with analysis than hunting for information. I think computers can do better, and Tableau does a fabulous job of finding those insights within a large volume of data, and that's really the essence of it. That needs a cultural shift, as you rightly pointed out. Stop consuming reports, start consuming insights. Very well put. The last question, I think, is that what is the biggest missing skill you see in a BI or data team today? In other words, what is the one thing that a team member can bring that serve as a multiplicative factor in the team success?
Oh, I love that question. I would say curiosity and being really inquisitive, because pretty much anyone can take a list of requirements and turn them into something. It's like, okay, these are the bits I want, I'm just going to build it. But if you can ask questions of many different people to find out something. So, let's take the example of a car, something all of us are pretty much familiar with. If you ask the salesperson and the engineer who built it and the person who designed it, if you ask all of them questions about the car beyond how much, petrol does it need, like, how does this work together? And why does this happen when I do this? You will find out so much more than if you say, I'm just going to sit in my car and I'm going to drive from A to B. If you are a car analyst, let's say. So I think asking questions and always challenging your own assumptions, but also the assumptions of others. And I'm not saying being a really annoying person to be around who's like, oh, they're always questioning me. It's more, hey, I found this, but I don't quite believe it to be true. what if X, what if Y, what if Z. So coming up with question. As an analyst, you should always be asking lots of questions. So don't focus all of your skills on building the perfect Sankey chart, which no one will ever need. Please focus your skills on developing like a holistic skill set. You can build charts, you can wrangle data into a certain shape, and that's great because those will help you actually do your job. But if you want to be memorable, if you want people to say, I want that person on my team, it's really about how analytical are you? What questions are you going to ask? How are you going about the process? Do you know how to manage stakeholders, how to engage the right people to find those answers and to find something more interesting than all the other people? I think that's what's going to be the missing skill set, and that's what's going to differentiate you from everyone else.
That's absolutely the best answer, I think. Very well put. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us today. And that was the last question. And in fact, I hope our audience liked it. And if you did, please look out for a feedback form, and it would really help us to organize similar content. And you're welcome to join our community. And I highly, highly recommend all of you to read this book, and absolutely it's going to be worth every minute of your life. And fantastic. Thank you so much for authoring this, Eva, and being part of this session today. Have a great rest of the day, and looking forward to speaking with you again. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. And if you do buy the book, by all means, use it like a workbook, work through it, write notes, test things out, and let me know what you think.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Take care.